Hello and welcome to AzureTracks. I'm Andrew Lowe's, and today I want to take a look at creating a storage account. So we're going to take a bit of a quick look at creating a storage account in Azure. So I've already logged in to portal.azure.com and I'm in my testing subscription. Now, I already have a resource group that I've been doing for some VM creations, and I want to create a storage account. What we're going to do is you just choose your testing subscription. You select the resource group you want to use. Now, you can, of course, create a new resource group as well, and that will display kind of in the review and create screen. We're actually going to use this pre-existing one here, though. Storage account names, these ones are kind of funny. They have a little bit of a requirement for it. So it needs to be between 3 and 24 characters and can only contain lowercase letters and numbers. So no capitalizations. So here we're going to call this store. Let's call this store creation games 1. So kind of fits in with the theme of creation games that we're playing. Now, because our resource group is already based in Canada Central, we're actually going to just kind of continue that. We're going to keep everything in the same one. I don't want to pay for testing in a premium tier of performance. So we're going to go with standard and we're going to go with storage V2. This is very versatile. Now we can change that down to blob storage if we want to use kind of bulk storage, or if we have a lot of, say, large files. CAD files are good in blob as well. We're actually going to go with just locally redundant. We don't want to have geo-redundant storage for testing. Now, that said, if we had read access geo-redundant, which is the default selection for replication, that's a little bit better for a production storage account, and it gives us much higher availability, of course. So next we'll move to networking. We're going to take a look at some of the different options through here. So we have public endpoint, which really gives us basically internet access to it. And the Microsoft network routing, Microsoft handles all of the routing for the Azure endpoint. If we want to use a public endpoint, now we can create our own public endpoint and then kind of wrap some firewall rules specifically around that endpoint and give it a separate public IP that we can kind of govern a little bit better. And certainly we can choose private endpoint, and we can create a private endpoint and then map that to our own internal networks. So we can actually map this to one of the DMARCs in our own VNets and make this available very easily and nicely to use for internal use. Now, that said, we're not going to do that. We're going to just keep this public because we're actually going to turn off access externally to it after we're finished our little test. One thing that's quite important is data protection. And I've actually selected ahead of time a couple of options in here. But let's talk about this. We want to turn on point-in-time restore for containers. And what that does basically is turn on the ability to restore a backup to a point in time. That's really kind of the long and the short of it. We're not going to enable that, but we are going to turn on soft delete for blob and soft delete for file shares. We're going to keep those at 7 days. That way we have a full week to figure out if we're missing a file and easily restore it. And here we're going to turn on tracking for versioning basically of files and for blob change feed. And it's going to stay relatively straightforward. Now, under the advanced tab, we can select some different options. I'm still kind of surprised to see that we can force this down to TLS1. Please use TLS 1.2. 1.0 and 1.1, of course, are deprecated options that we should definitely not be using over the internet. And if we have any compromise, we can run into some trouble, that's for sure. So blob storage, we're going to allow public access. We're going to use a hot tier. It's a little bit faster. So hot versus cool tiers. I think there's a good description here. The account access tier is the default tier inferred with any blob. The explicitly set tier hot access tier is ideal for frequently accessed data, and the cool access tier is ideal for infrequently accessed data. Really, we're talking about archive. So archives infrequently accessed files, really nice on cool storage because it definitely lowers our costs significantly. We can't configure any data lake options because we haven't enabled hierarchical namespaces. But Azure Files, we're going to enable Azure Files because we're actually going to do something with this another time. And tables and queues are disabled for kind of the same reason. We're not using any customer managed keys. So we just allow Microsoft Platform in Azure to manage our encryption keys. So we can add some tags in here if we want. There is a couple of tags in use in my tenant already, but we're not going to use those today. We're going to just go straight into review. And it looks like everything is going to be okay. It did a quick validation, as we can see up at the top here, and it looks good. So we'll just create the storage. And we may do a bit of a time lapse if this takes a minute. I think typically it takes about 30 seconds or so. In my experience, it's quite quick. Okay, through the magic of pause and resume, we have now fully created our storage account and it's ready to go. So we can actually head straight into our resource here and we can see in no time at all, we can create file shares, tables, queues, and containers in here. And of course, we have very little to no data usage as of this time. Okay, so as you can see, we've selected the networking blade under settings. And on firewalls and virtual networks, we have selected all networks, which gives access to internet and all VNets in our account by default. That's just all networks, including internet. So as you can see, it has some similar options to where we were, or rather when we were creating the storage account, and you can add a private endpoint and things like that. So in here, we're going to say on the firewalls and virtual networks tab, we'll do selected networks, and let's add existing virtual networks. So we're going to add this virtual network, and then we're going to say all subnets. And we're going to add it. And there we go. And we can, of course, say we'll add our client IP address range. So only certain IP ranges can add in there, and just use your CIDR notation. So IP address /22 or 24 or something, whatever your CIDR calculation is for your network. And definitely, one of the things we want to say is exceptions to the restrictions. We want to allow trusted Microsoft services to access the storage account. So things like Azure Files, that would be a good example. Also, we want to allow read access to storage logging from any network or allow read access to storage metrics from any network. So we're not going to enable those, but we are going to allow trusted services from Microsoft. And certainly, if we had the option, if we'd made a different network choice in here, you'll see the network routing light up. You can use internet routing or you can use Microsoft network routing. And once you've selected your options, go ahead and save. It only takes a moment to do the save. As you can see, it was quite quick. So now you can see we've removed the internet access from here, and the storage account will no longer be available over the internet by default, which is a good thing. We want to restrict that internally whenever possible and increase our security by removing and all those extra options and reducing our risk footprint. So that is a very quick condensed version of creating a storage account and enabling some of the services within, and then a very quick, super high level about just turning off internet access, but allowing your own servers and systems internal access as well as Microsoft services. So thanks again. This has been another little AzureTracks tidbit on creating a storage account. Thanks again for tuning in and have a fantastic day.